All right, everyone present, it is now 11:30 a.m. on September 26, 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dave Joint, and I will be the conducting officer in this formal investigation, which is being held to develop the facts and determine responsibility, if any, concerning charges that Mr. Mozinski, while employed as a track inspector, for allegedly failing to report defective switch at MAPO 5.0 on the KO subdivision near Fargo, North Dakota on September 8, 2016, as outlined in the investigation notice dated September 9, 2016. I request all cell phones be turned off at this time. I will be recording this investigation, and the recording will be the basis for the formal or official printed transcript. Mr. Mozinski, do you have a representative present to represent you here today?
I do.
And who would that be?
Bruce Glover out of Minneapolis.
Mr. Glover, are you here to represent Mr. Mozinski?
I am.
And could you please state for the record your full name, address, and occupation?
I'm Bruce Glover, General Chairman, Burlington Northern System Federation, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay. Mr. Mozinski, are you ready to proceed with the investigation?
I am.
And Mr. Glover, are you ready to proceed with the investigation?
We are ready to proceed, but before the investigation begins, we have some protests we'd like to make. Investigation notice into the record. Before any testimony begins, we would like to have Rule 40 of the collective bargaining agreement entered into the transcript. And we can either read Rule 40 into the transcript, or we can ask the transcriber to type it into the transcript as if it were read. I have a copy of Rule 40 of our agreement that I can give you as an exhibit to assist in that process.
Okay, Mr. Glover, at this time I think we'll make Rule 40A Exhibit number 1 at the hearing, and we will have the transcriber type it in its entirety.
Thank you. The two objections we'd like to start with in this investigation is we're going to ask that the investigation be canceled because it is being held in violation of the clear provisions of Rule 40. Rule 40A requires that an investigation of an employee in service 60 days or more, as Principal Mozinski has been, it shall be set promptly not later than 15 days from the date of the occurrence. In this case, the incident allegedly occurred on September 8th, 2016. The investigation notice that was issued to Mr. Mozinski was dated November 9th, 2016. Today's date, the date of the hearing, is September 26th, 2016. Clearly, Mr. Conducting Officer, today's date is beyond 15 days as required in Rule 48, and therefore this investigation is in violation of the agreement and should be canceled at this time.
Okay, Mr. Glover, thank you. Your protest will be entered into the record, but at this time we'll let the investigation determine the facts, and we will continue with the hearing.
We will continue under protest because it's clear you cannot deny the investigation is in violation of our rules.
Once again, your objection is noted, but we'll let the transcript determine that.
Thank you, Mr. Conducting Officer. We have a second protest to make in this investigation, and also would again ask that the investigation be canceled because the company has denied, refused to present witnesses at the investigation that have pertinent knowledge to the charge. The company has charged Mr. Mozinski with failing to report a defect at the switch near Fargo, North Dakota. That location and milepost is the assigned territory of the Dilworth section crew. And on September 10th, the day after the notice was issued, on behalf of Mr. Mozinski, we sent a letter to you, the conducting officer, and requested that the section foreman of the Dilworth section be required to attend the hearing as a witness. In addition, we'd ask that the section crew that worked in close proximity with the section foreman, the Dilworth section foreman on that day, also be witnesses at this hearing. In that letter, we described the fact that the section crew worked on the switch the day of the derailment. Yet, Track Inspector Mozinski is charged with an alleged failure to report a defect, when in fact the section crew had first-hand knowledge and should be made part of this investigation. They are not here. The company has an obligation to present all witnesses that have pertinent information to the charge at hand. Otherwise, it cannot be considered a fair and impartial investigation, and therefore we would ask that this investigation be closed and no charges or discipline be issued against Principal Mozinski.
Okay, Mr. Glover, once again, thank you for the protest, entering your objection. But at this time, we will continue with the hearing, and once again, we'll let the transcript and the facts brought out at the hearing determine whether the Dilworth section crew had any pertinent information or not. But at this time, we will proceed.
We will not be able to obtain that information without them being present and sequestered at this hearing, but over our objections, we will proceed.
Okay, so at this time, we will proceed with the investigation. Thank you. Okay, we have carrier witness, Roadmaster Jones present. Mr. Jones, could you please state for the record your full name, address, and occupation?
Full name Jimmy Jones, Roadmaster, Fargo, North Dakota.
Mr. Jones, could you tell us what you know about the day in question?
Yeah, on the day in question, September 8th, Mr. Mozinski was track inspecting on the KO subdivision. He rolled past a switch about milepost 5.0 and failed to report a defect, resulting in a derailment.
Mr. Jones, how do you know that there was a defect on that switch at the time that Mr. Mozinski allegedly inspected it?
Well, we had a geometry car run through there about a week before, kicked out a yellow tag, told Mr. Mozinski to make sure he was watching it, and it most likely was a red tag then, because it caused the derailment.
So in your mind, there's no doubt that the defect had to be in existence and existed at the time Mr. Mozinski allegedly inspected the switch?
No doubt in my mind, otherwise there would have been no trains that went on the ground.
And has it been determined that the derailment was caused by this switch, or at this switch?
Yep, it's been determined by a wide gauge defect that Mr. Mozinski failed to report.
All right, that's all I have for you right now, Mr. Jones. Mr. Glover, do you have any questions of Mr. Jones?
I do. Mr. Jones, good morning.
Morning.
On September 8th, the date of the derailment, were you at the switch?
No, I was in my office.
On September 8th, or even the 7th, the day before, did you actually see the switch?
Well, no, but I went to it like a week before when that Geo car came through.
Aha. How many trains a day go across that switch, Mr. Jones?
Well, we're a big terminal, so we got about 8 that run across it a day.
So, 40, 50 trains have gone across that since the last time you saw it.
I guess I'd have to get a sheet out, though, and count them.
No derailments have occurred?
Nope.
Now, Mr. Jones, were you aware that the Dilworth section worked on that switch on the day in question?
Yeah, I'd sent them over there, but I mean, they were going to look at some stuff. I don't know if they ever did perform any work there, though.
when you testified, you said that it most likely was a red tag, so you don't actually know if it was a red tag. Is that true?
Well, I mean, the train wouldn't have gone on the ground if there
You
was.
didn't see the switch, did you, Mr. Jones?
I was not at the switch. You are correct.
And you don't know that it was a red tag. You said it's most likely. So you actually don't know for sure. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the train went on the ground. If
I know that, Mr. Jones. A lot of trains go on the grounds, but you don't actually know that that switch was defective, and you don't actually know that Track Inspector Mozinski failed to report a defect, do you?
I guess I just have to stand by. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Jones, just one follow-up is, you had instructed Mr. Mozinski to watch this defect and keep an eye on it. Is that what you stated?
Yes, I had made sure Mr. Mozinski knew about that defect, and it was a yellow tag. That means it's going close to red, so he needed to make sure he watched it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Glover, do you have any follow-up questions?
Follow-up question. There's no dispute. You don't disagree that the Dilworth section did work at the switch on the day in question. Is that correct?
Well, all I can say is I sent them there. I don't know if they performed any work or not, Mr. Glover.
So you didn't actually see the switch, and you don't actually know what your section crew did there. Is that correct?
I do not know what the section crew did there, and I was not at the switch.
But you agree they worked there. That's correct.
But I sent them there. I don't know if they worked there.
I don't have any further questions.
All right. That's all the questions there are for you at this time, Roadmaster Jones, but please stick around and in case we need to recall you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mozinski, I have no further questions you at this time. Mr. Glover, do you have questions for Mr. Mozinski?
I do, thank you, Mr. Conducting Officer. Mr. Mozinski, on September 8th, did you go inspect the switch at milepost 5 near Fargo, North Dakota?
Yeah, as I stated earlier when Mr. Joint was questioning, yes, I went over that switch and inspected it.
What did you do? What did you see that day when you did that?
Well, there was a geometry car that had ran a week before, so we knew there was a yellow tag on it. And so I had been watching it because we have to inspect it at least 4 times a week. But I got out of the truck and measured it, and it measured within compliance. We had a flow order on it already.
So you did inspect it, and you did measure it. Was there a defect? When you made that inspection, was there a defect that needed to be reported?
No, there was no defect. The flow order we currently had on it protected it for that class of track where it sit right there.
Are you aware that the Dilworth section crew was called to work on that switch on September 8th?
Yes, it was one of the things we had talked about the week before after the Geo car ran. That morning before I went over it, we had talked at the section house. And then they had got joint with me right after I had gone over it about 5 miles down the track.
So you are aware that they did report to the switch?
Correct.
So there was no, you inspected the switch, you measured the switch, there was no defect to report, and the Dilworth section crew worked on it on September 8th.
Correct. That's why we wanted to try to get Jimmy here.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Mr. Mozinski, just a couple follow-up. Had you been instructed by Roadmaster Jones to watch this defect?
I had, and that was the reason why I put the slow order on originally.
Okay. And Mr. Mozinski, did a derailment occur because of this switch defect?
A derailment happened at that switch.
And do you know for sure that if the Dilworth section did any work on that switch or not that day?
Yes, that's why we've requested to have the Dilworth foreman here, and it hasn't been on.
Okay. Mr. Glover, do you have any follow-up questions for Mr. Mozinski?
When you inspected the switch, was it a defect that required reporting?
No.
And a section crew did work on the switch after you inspected it?
Yes, after I went over it, a section crew made some repairs or did something to it, but I mean, I was not there at the time.
when the roadmaster instructed you to keep an eye or to watch that switch, had you been watching it?
Yes, every time I'd gone over it, I'd got out to make sure I measured it.
I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for you right now, Mr. Mazinski. All right, gentlemen, I am getting ready to close this investigation. Mr. Mazinski, has this investigation been held in a fair and impartial manner?
I don't believe so with the objections that Mr. Glover has raised.
Okay. Have you been able to ask questions of all witnesses?
We have.
And do you have a closing statement that you would like to make at this time?
I'll defer that to Mr. Glover as well.
Okay, Mr. Glover, has this investigation been held in a fair and impartial manner?
Mr. Conducting Officer, I think we've made timely objections throughout the hearing, and so the answer to that question is we do not believe so.
Mr. Glover, have you been able to ask questions of all witnesses?
Those that were present, yes.
Okay. And do you have a closing statement you'd like to make at this time?
We do. At the beginning of the hearing, we objected to the time limit violation in Rule 40 of our agreement. At the beginning of the hearing, we objected to the fact that the company failed to produce all witnesses that have pertinent knowledge to the incident under review. The company in this case has attempted to tell its story, but not the whole story and not the true story, and that's a violation of the due process, fair and impartial rights that Principal Mozinski is entitled to. In discipline, the company carries the burden of proof. In this case, it has been proven that the track inspector Mozinski inspected the switch, no defect that required reporting was detected, and that the section crew worked on that switch the day of the incident and the company failed to present them at the hearing. And what the company grossly has failed to do in this case, and that is there is no proof that Principal Mozinski saw, detected, or failed to report a defect, in that switch. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Glover. Mr. Mazinski, do you have anything you want to add at this time?
Nope.
Okay, Mr. Glover, have you finished your statements? You have
I
nothing
have.
else to add?
I have.
All right, we'll show the investigation closed at 12:40 p.m. and we will provide you with copies of the transcript when they're available.
Thank you.